Thank you, Jennifer, for your talk. What the Buddha actually said when Mahapajapati brought her, I think it was 500 women across 150 miles of dusty, hot northern India. Woody, you have to hit that little button there. What the Buddha actually said was, he said, my teaching will live for 1,000 years, but if women are ordained, then it will only live for 500. And of course, he said that over 2,500 years ago. So, yeah. So I want to tell another story about sexism. I've told this story before. So Jennifer was talking about the woman who couldn't cross the river because, oh, God forbid, her clothes might get wet or something like that. And of course,
shoes.
What?
The shoes.
It was her shoes. Okay, it was her shoes that would get wet. You could take them off and go barefoot. But anyway, Zen Master Bon Hae used to tell this story all the time about this woman who gets a flat tire by the side of the road, and she's just totally helpless. You know, she can't change a flat tire, and she's just completely, totally helpless. And then some guy comes and he changes the tire for her, and I really don't remember how the story goes. But this idea that, you know, a woman is totally helpless and can't change a flat tire. You know, I made it a point to learn how to change my oil and change my tires. I've forgotten by now, you know. Might as well pay people who will do it right. But yeah, so I would get really angry hearing this story. I get incredibly angry. I'm going to have to put my mask on because I'm about to shout. So yeah, so, and I would follow him around. You know, this was before I had a kid. So I would practice. I practiced with him on the East Coast, and then I moved to Kansas. And I would spend my summers in Berkeley, so I practiced with him in Berkeley. And then there was this guy who was part of our school, and he didn't have a center, but he had a really nice house near Boulder. And so one time there was a retreat in Boulder, and so I showed up in Boulder. And so I would just sort of follow the Master Sung around. And then this retreat in Boulder, you know, he was telling this story again. And I really had it with this story. I was just so tired of this story. And so, you know, he tells the story, and I raised my hand, and I said, why do you tell a sexist story? And he made some kind of lame excuse, you know, and sort of went on. And I'm just sitting there fuming. You know, just sitting there absolutely fuming, like, during the sitting period. I'm just like, he's so sexist, he's so horrible, you know, he's got to change, you know, and I'm just fuming about how horrible it is. And so when the Tupi gets hit for walking meditation, for walking meditation, I just leap out of my seat. I don't even get in line. Like, you're supposed to get in line, you know. I just run out of the drawing room and I find him, you know, and he's with the guy at his house we were at, and he's doing this thing with, you know, calligraphy. He's a wonderful calligrapher, and he's showing this guy some calligraphy, and I just burst into the room. I said, why do you tell this story, this sexist, horrible story about this woman? And, you know, going on and on. And he looks at me and says, I never made women. And I have no idea if he ever told that story again. But it was really interesting what my mind was doing, you know? I mean, yeah, it was a sexist story and it was stupid, you know? But I was sitting there and taking this precious opportunity, I think, and that's something. I was taking this precious opportunity to practice and getting myself so worked up, you know? So it's really interesting because, yeah, this world is full of shit. It's just, there's all this stuff around us that, yeah, it's really horrible. And, you know, actually telling sexist stories isn't nearly as horrible as, you know, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Sudan and what's going on in Yemen and all these places, floods and fires and, terrible, terrible things and things people do to each other, that are just so terrible. But if we sit there and just go like that, what are we doing? The job is to wake up. And we wake up, and then we can see, oh, this is something I can do. Oh, not effective here, but effective there. And we can see it's there. So I encourage people not to roil themselves up, but just really wake up. Just wake up. And then see what happens. So thank you for your talk. Are there any questions?
I have one I have to ask.
Well, everybody's going to say, how happy you're asking questions, because otherwise we'd start sitting again.
So, I actually have two, but I'll ask one and see. But, with that whole idea of the patriarchy in the language, it's a wonderful story because it really points to the point of the story of the monk who carries the woman and sits her down and it's over, and the other monk who never touched her yet, essentially carried her. The point of the story is a wonderful story. But don't some of those stories, where I get tripped up now, I get tripped up a lot, but doesn't the story need to change? And at what point is there damage done because we are telling a story that reinforces this sexist view? And some of them, that's mild and but it leads to something else, and then something else, and then something else. And so you have one person who hears it, and hears I don't have a woman in the sailboat, I need to help her over the river. So that means when I see a woman, I need to help them. That's what the Buddhist way is. Oh, that's what I need to do. And this is the point of the story. So, yes, yes, I understand holding on to the story, but I just wonder if the damage that's done when you hold on to some of those stories that are sexist.
Yeah, actually, there's an easy fix to that story, and all you have to do is you have to make her a woman who has mobility problems, and that there used to be a bridge, and now there's no bridge. That story is easy to fix.
That won't put them in.
No, because the point is, this monk has to have this idea of you don't touch a woman. Now, you can make it a nun, and make two nuns and make it a man. But the point is that story has an easy fix, but some of those stories don't have easy fixes. And it's interesting. So I saw, there's this wonderful poet and literary person named Fred Moten, and he's African American, and he, for decades, he's been, how the avant-garde is. The avant-garde isn't like new, it goes back like 100 or 200 years, but he's in, the experimental American poetry, and he's a major figure in that. And at the time that he was developing as a writer, there were very few people in that kind of poetry who were not white men, and but there were many more women than there were people of African Americans, and it's interesting because a sort of parallel kind of avant-garde grew up in African American poets that didn't really relate to. It's like there was a separation, but he bridged them, and so he was giving this talk. It was a sort of it was kind of a talk about sort of, it was actually a talk about jazz and rhythm, and he kept referring to various philosophers in the European tradition. And then it comes time for questions, and somebody basically asked him, how can you read these people? They're so anti-Black. They said so many racist things, and they did. You know, they did. And he basically said, yeah, that's true, but they also say these other things. And these other things are things that, you know, help me. So I'm not going to throw the whole thing out. I recognize them for who they are. And I don't support, obviously I don't support that. But then there's other things, and those other things I can build on. And it was just like this breadth of mind where he didn't get stuck. You know, I was just so blown away that he didn't get stuck, that he could just take wherever he needed to take and not get stuck in the source. It was very interesting. And you know, it's like Allen Ginsberg worked with Ezra Pound, and Ezra Pound was a notorious anti-Semite. He was horrible. You know, he was a real fascist and a real anti-Semite, and he supported Hitler and Mussolini and all that stuff. And but Ginsberg was able to see past that somehow, and you know, see something there, and he didn't get stuck. And how do we not get stuck? How do we see the humanity of everyone, including people who have vile views, who don't see the humanity in everyone, who take large groups of people and say they're not human? You know, how do we make our minds so big that we can even take those people in to our hearts? And it's not easy. And I just admire the people who can do it. And yeah, when we can move the story so that it doesn't have to reflect those sexist viewpoints or those racist viewpoints, whatever it is. And sometimes we can't. Sometimes the story is something we just can't change. It's just embedded in it. And it's just a very interesting challenge. So thank you for making the effort, because that's what we have to do. We just have to make the effort, and we have to call it as it is when we see it, and not get stuck sometimes. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I tend to be one of those people who get stuck. Maybe it's because I'm a women's gender and sexuality studies major, but it's like I'm sitting here like stewing. And we were actually at the plant nursery yesterday, and I asked her a question. I asked her, my mom, how, like, I can't understand some of the sexist rules, I guess. Like, I guess in Zen Buddhism, like women having to take more.
Are you talking about the 8 special rules for nuns?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I probably evidence of not practicing enough. But now I think I've reached the point when I try to practice, I just get so angry about nothing or everything too. Like thinking about the state of the world or thinking about like how I forgot my lunch that day. And then I'm having to quit, which I don't like doing either, clearly. But regarding getting stuck, it's like, how do you get unstuck?
Well, seeing that you're stuck is a good place to start from. You know? So, and it's not just stuck in self-righteousness, we get stuck in all kinds of things, right? And just when you're stuck, you can say, oh, look, I'm stuck. That's a place to start from. something that helps me a lot when my thoughts go like this, whatever it is. I mean, not just, about sexist bullshit, but also about something someone said to me, or something that I did or didn't do, or whatever, all the things, those little tiny things, how much something costs. Oh my God, look at gasoline prices, whatever it is, whatever people's minds get stuck in. When my mind starts doing that, I find it helpful to look at it and ask, what is the substance of this thought? And I don't mean the intellectual content. I mean, what's it made out of? Like, this is made out of plastic and probably has some metal parts, and it's got a battery, and that's what it's made of. What is its substance? This is wood. What is its substance? What are the substance? What is the substance of each of our thoughts? And you just look at that. Just interrogate it, as literary scholars like to use the word interrogate. Just interrogate it. What is the substance of this thought? And something very interesting happens when you do that. And I'm not going to, I could summarize and say, you'll discover that it has no substance, but that's not quite true. And that's just an idea. But if you actually look at it, you actually look at anything, something happens. Your mind opens. And then whatever it is, it doesn't grab you as tight. It lets go a little bit. You don't have to try to squish it, because that never works. And you don't have to try to disavow it. You don't have to try to get rid of it. Just look at it. Who are you? What are you made of? And see what happens. Okay?
I'm already thinking that all my thoughts are probably somehow socially constructed, because I live in the patriarchy. So I think I just need to relax and look at them for what they are.
Yeah, everything's socially constructed, okay? Everything's socially constructed. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
But what is it? What is it made of? Okay? Yeah, don't get lost up here. Yeah, I'm teaching this class on the Avatamsaka Sutra through the online Sangha, and believe me, those people thousands of years ago, so that was written probably about maybe 1800, 1900 years ago, was when it solidified. They understood all this stuff. They didn't say words like socially constructed, but they understood the provisional nature of what we call reality. They were very aware of it. And what's interesting is they didn't try to substitute something else. The true reality is, like, a lot of spiritual, traditions and sort of what I consider fake spiritual traditions, ones that are kind of fly by night and whatever, don't come out of real practice. But a lot of them have this idea that, like, this hand isn't real means that this hand isn't real. And of course, if you, hit it with something, you discover it's real. But also this notion that, somehow it's not real. But somewhere like Plato, there was like this ideal, the idea of hand, this sort of platonic hand out there. And this is just an instantiation of this hand, right? And then there's other things where, if it's physical, it's not real, because the true reality is this glowing, wonderful, I don't know what, like pure spirit, whatever that is, and then you substitute this idea of pure spirit for, what we see and what we hear and what we, sense and feel and smell and everything like that. That doesn't work. So in Buddhism, you have the absolute, which is this before thinking, not socially constructed, and then you have the relative, which is this thing that we recognize. Here's a hand, and they're going like this. Well, the absolute and the relative cannot be separated. It's really interesting, they're not separated. Each is a kind of instantiation of the other. It's like two sides of the hand. You can't just have one side of the hand, you have to have both. So they were very sophisticated, these men and women way back then. They were very sophisticated. They understood all of this stuff. And they understood not to make something that then you cling to and oppose to how things actually are. They understood all that. It's really interesting. So, yeah. Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions?
Say that not so long ago, last November,
Could you speak up because the masks are making it hard to hear? Or yeah, you can take your mask off while you're talking if you want.
I got, last November I got, all of a sudden got very interested in having practice. And I learned that it was not so long ago, just for the 17th of March, he was not yet 40 at this time. That he is the first one who had made a change in his image and using that all the nuns could beg. Beg is a very big component of that practice. And all the nuns could have all the classes, the monks. He himself is not even 40. So we're talking about thousands of years up now. Just not so long ago, really. I find it was absolutely unbelievable. This is the type of comment that I want to make because my experience is that because I'm Asian, because I'm in the math and science track, I was so wrong, that I was very comfortable be around with male students, male colleagues, and my own students, who I have to work with in all these settings. Since I was born and raised in a communist country, and then at that period of time, that we were truly liberated. So I felt very comfortable as well. In the science academy, there were like 8 girls and 50 boys, but I never felt was intimidated by any of these things. What I really want to make a comment is, as many as these Dharma Teacher Weekend that I participated in PCCA, we always have these diversity training, and as just Jack says, quite a lot of this shit is just happening inside of the center, it's not outside. And my personal experience about worse discrimination against women, or discrimination against Asians, or all kind of people. These direct experiences is often happening in where I practice. So, not so much in the outside world. So I was always wondering, was it because when you're in this practice, then we're basically always in a very naked situation, in the middle of a huge retreat, you're down for weeks, all your fences down, so your very raw components start coming out. And then a lot of them appear to be very sexist, very racist, and it's just the nature of this kind of practice that we feel more and see more in that sort of environment. Because I don't feel as suppressed outside of this practice, out there, as within myself, right? Within the people who practice. whether it's locally or school. So this is my question, is it because of the nature of this practice, and a lot of these what we call retreat behavior just came out because after 5 weeks or 6 weeks, your fence is all down, so everybody's going around sort of mad and ridiculous, and so we're not holding on or trying to behave or trying to follow the social rules outside of this retreat environment, and that's how I felt. So my question, you're very experienced, you had many retreats. So with that, just because of that, or with something else, because like what Liz said, that this is, look, fundamentally, I mean, 17 to come up on God's sake, he's not the 40. He is the first and only one who started to allow the nuns, not the whole entire community, just his own image. So this is how long it takes for this ship to melt. You see what I'm talking about? So what I want to, it is patriotic, right? So, we know a lot of nuns. A lot of the story, the women appear as old ladies who have some wisdom, right? Or young girls who are completely too stupid, right? And once in a while, you have some young female teachers. Then throughout history, they may not appear, but they were hidden, right? The companies will not register them as there's no record, so you have to really go and dig out. Like the women always in practice, always in practice very strongly. There are women and masters throughout Chinese lineage, but you don't know who they are until they're released. You have to dig around this tradition of the practice this history. And also the treatment of women students are not very good. This is, and often it's just people just tell you, put up the shit. People tell you literally, just put up the shit. Look into yourself. So my feeling is, I do 500 hours a day because I'm often very, very angry. And so the way I have to deal with it is I just go down, knock myself out of it. Okay? So it does help. But I think the place that helped the most is outside the summer, not exactly inside the summer. So this is one of the things I addressed when we were doing the diversity training a few years ago. And the people who organize it keep on saying, out there, out there, out there, outside, day, 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 for every single thing there was what we were talking about is day, day, day. Eventually I raised my hand and said, who are they? Just text out to chant as it was. And then that's it. That's the whole thing. So sometimes I think it's really nice to hear that if you're female and then you just keep practicing and don't let this shit bother you, then everything will be better. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't. So I've been in this school for 10 years. There are many times I thought I just won't show up anymore. There are many times I just felt like, shit, I'm just going to go to Japanese school. If it's just going to be that bad, might as well than not, because there always sounds bad to begin with. I'm just going to go there. But there is no this here. So there's no place to go. I understand that. But how do we help practitioners to coping with these sort of issues throughout our practice, so we could, it's like Kat said, yeah, you can practice on kids all day long. Well, I need to those places, but it's often not issues outside of the practice. It is within the practice community, and then I don't think we address that as much as needed.
So may I say?
I'm always looking for women teachers. Myself, I go all over the world looking for women teachers. I look for them online, I look them in retreats, and I travel to Europe if I could just meet somebody like Barbara, because I want a role model. I want to be close, to be with a person who sustained that sort of pressure and difficulty and all that stuff. You know, I do. I mean, I will look. I'm very aggressive when I wanted to somebody to teach me, especially if they're women. You know, so I think perhaps you're on the executive committee. Perhaps we could do something about it in the school line.
So,
I mean, I could keep going out 1,000. But I'm
everybody's
still-
human.
Right.
And we, as a Sangha, reflect what is around us. And all you can do is say it when you see it. Generalizations do not help. But you can say it when you see it. And if you say it from a strong center and an open heart and a clear mind, then maybe you can be effective. Not always. Not everyone can hear it. Okay? So I had my mentor in mathematics was this Mary Ellen Rudin. She was quite remarkable. She came from a tiny, tiny town in Texas. And she grew up at a time when, women didn't do a lot of stuff. But somehow she never noticed these rules. She just didn't pay attention. And when she started college, it was during World War II, so that the men were all in the army. And so they had to encourage women. And so she was encouraged because the men weren't there. So you had to encourage women. So she kind of escaped a lot of it. And then when she got her PhD, and her husband, who was also a wonderful mathematician, he got a job, and she couldn't get a job in the same place because it was considered nepotism. If you hired both members of a couple, and of course you would hire the man and not the woman. And she just didn't let it get to her. She just went on. She just went on. She didn't pay attention. Just did her mathematics, and was brilliant, absolutely brilliant mathematics. Everyone recognized that she was completely brilliant. And it's like she didn't even notice, It was very interesting. And then, many, many years later, by the time I came around and other people came around, and she started noticing, that there were these women who had really been affected, that they couldn't just ignore it. And she started paying attention, and she started very deliberately encouraging women, And it's like everybody has their own way of getting through this. Everybody has their own way. And there are times when you just have to ignore it, because if you pay attention to it, it'll just keep you down. Like these nuns that the Karmapa says that they can, that they can do. So debate in Tibetan Buddhism, it's like Kongan practice for us. It's the sort of the using the mind to overturn the mind, kind of to cut through the mind. And so for, a couple of thousand years, women were not allowed to do it. But these women were coming out of a tradition of women. That tradition was there. And suddenly something was open to them, but they came from a tradition of very strong women who said, even if I'm not allowed to do this, I am still going to practice, and I'm going to practice very hard. And I have this sisterhood, and we support each other. I mean, of course, everybody gets mad, you put too much salt in the soup or whatever, but, basically, we support each other. And so the old women and the old wise women, it's not that they're old wise women, it's that even an old woman can be so wise. So you idiot man, how come, what's wrong with you? I mean, it's a kind of a negative thing. So, these stories like the woman at the tea house, and, she says something and the monk suddenly realizes that, oh my God, he doesn't understand anything. And then he goes off and he becomes a great Zen master, and she's still in the tea house, right? And what he realizes, I'm so stupid because this old woman, this inferior creature, bested me in an exchange. So I have to really work hard. It's not like a positive image, these wise women. It's not that. It's like even this idiot old woman can say this, right? It's like that. So it is deep. It is deep. And somehow we have to just cut through it. We can't let it stop us. And if you happen not to be a woman, don't perpetrate it. Don't keep it going, you know? And women keep it going too, because we absorb these. We absorb these things we don't even know we have, that we've done. And you know, one thing you said, Ting, about being raw, yeah, on retreats and intensive practice, we get really raw. You know, this is just a one-day retreat, but even so, we all got up early this morning, and we didn't have a lot of nap time. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired, and I'm kind of feeling a little raw. And then when you do this day after day after day, and you know, when you start at 5 a.m., you know, your bows at 5 a.m. and you don't stop practice until 9:30 at night. And you do this day after day after day, and yeah, you get raw. And then things come out that you don't even know were there. And people say things to you, and maybe you react more than you would otherwise. And maybe they wouldn't have said that thing to you if, well, they're not supposed to say anything, they're on retreat, but basic people do, you know. Maybe they wouldn't have even said that because they're raw and you're raw and we're all raw. And so kindness and compassion are really important. And even in that situation where you feel that you're being put down, you're being held back, whatever it is, you know, this person is sexist, racist, whatever it is, you know, even if you feel that way, you know, homophobic, whatever it is, you know, even if you feel that way about this person, they're still human. And we have to see that, and we can't get stuck. We just can't get stuck. It's really hard. Because it's so easy to label somebody, and okay, you're no good, and I don't want anything to do with you again. It's so easy to do that. And to just take that rawness and use it to touch everyone's humanity. Because the fact is, all the time we're raw. We just don't realize it because we cover it up, you know, with all the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and other people. But just that rawness, that's our humanity. And just to be completely open and completely seeing everybody's deep Buddha nature. You know, I think it's the Quakers say something about how when they talk to someone, they try to see, what is it, the spirit, or I forget what word they use, but to always try to see everyone's Buddha nature. Even when they say really horrible things or do really horrible things, to really see everyone's Buddha nature. You know, right now, like, you know, American politicians, for good reason, are saying that Putin is a war criminal. He is a war criminal, probably. Well, hey, we've been war criminals too, hello. But, you know, you go around and you say, hey, you're a war criminal, and how's this person ever going to negotiate with you? How are they ever going to change their position? You know? So we somehow need to work together. It's hard, it's really hard, you're right. It's really hard. And somehow we have to do it. And that's not saying, oh, nothing happened, it was perfectly fine. That's not saying that. You know, that's not saying the thing of, you know, if you were truly enlightened, this wouldn't bother you. You know, it's not that. But just in the middle of all this stuff, to somehow just see who we all are. See everyone's rawness, see everyone's humanity, see everyone's Buddha nature. And that's what you're talking to. That's what you're relating to. Even when it comes out really weird. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. And not to get, not to let it stop you from practicing, not to let it stop you from your own awakening, not to let it stop you. That's really important. You know, when I was in graduate school in math, I mean, it was horrible for women. It was just horrible. And people would say these things like to my face, like, oh, why are you here? Why aren't you married? Like, what? You know, are you serious? Yeah. And so, you know, it was just unbelievable. But, and if I stopped and, you know, if I let it get to me, then I would never do mathematics. It would just be unsustainable. But I really loved mathematics. And by God, I was going to do it. And I wasn't going to let them stop me from doing it. You know? And we have this amazing practice. And yeah, people who practice are idiots because people everywhere are idiots. And people who practice do stupid things because people everywhere do stupid things. But it is such an amazing thing that we do here, sitting in silence for hours and hours and chanting together and bowing together and doing koan practice and walking together and eating in silence in this ridiculous formal style, you know, where your chopsticks have to face this way and the honey bear has to face that way, you know, and I mean, and we do it together, and then, you know, the stuff that I like it like this, well, I like it like that kind of, you know, goes away. Like your spoon and your fork have to face that way. It's not what you want. So we have this practice that it's not about what we want, and it enables us to really liberate ourselves. And it's amazing. And don't ever let anything from outside stop you from doing it just because you think this person doesn't like me or they don't like my kind of person, you know, whatever it is. Don't let it stop you. Just like those women before the Karmapa said, oh yeah, you can do debate. You can do that. For thousands of years before that, there were women who were practicing. Nothing was going to stop them. And that mind of nothing's going to stop me. You know, Fred Moten, you know, African American, reading these people who would say these racist, terrible things. And that's not going to stop him. So don't let it stop you, whatever it is. You know, we're for some reason, we're just talking about mostly sexism, a little bit of racism. You know, I mentioned homophobia. There's lots of things, right? But don't let it stop you. Whatever it is, just keep practicing. You know, even the little interpersonal stuff. Oh, this person doesn't like me. I don't want to be around this person because they make me feel so uncomfortable because I know they don't like me. Don't let it stop you. Show up. Just keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up, and don't let it stop you. And realize their humanity is the same as your humanity. Their Buddha nature is the same as your Buddha nature. Just do that. And it's not easy. And sometimes it just feels horrible. But you don't let that stop you, because it's not about what we like and what we dislike. It's not about how we feel, whether we feel good or whether we feel bad. It's about that necessity of practice, and recognizing the necessity of practice and practicing together, even with people you might in the moment not get along with. Just practicing together. That's really important. You know, in Asia, the way you clean potatoes, you put them in a big tub, and there's a hole in the top, and you know, you have the stick that goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and it roils the potatoes, and then the potatoes, they rub against each other, and before you know it, they're all clean, right? Instead of picking up a potato and cleaning it, they clean each other. And that's what we're doing. We're cleaning each other. That's why we practice together. So we rub up against each other and we clean each other. And yeah, sometimes it's really hard. I mean, I know I went through times when I didn't want to walk into the Zen Center, but I did it anyway. So I really encourage people to really practice, really keep that strong direction, and keep that open mind and that open heart, and develop that strong center. So thank you. Let's see. If there's another question, we can take it. Anybody on Zoom who wants to ask a question? This is your chance.
I don't think it's so much of a question as all this discussion about differences and how they rub up against us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding it very painful to watch certain TV programs that are made in the West that have this extremely anti-Chinese and anti-Asian bias.
Yes, it's terrible. Yeah.
And sometimes it's mingled also with what could be interpreted as sexism. Like recently I was watching a program, a medical program, which featured an Asian, maybe 6 or 7-year-old child portrayed as an incipient psychopath. And I found myself asking, in America, you've got maybe a 7% Asian population, maybe a 4.5% according to Google's general psychopathy in the general population. And out of that, they had to pick one TV show, one girl who is Asian, to turn into an incipient psychopath. What are the odds of that?
Yeah.
So I've never been exposed to so much discussion about difference as I have practicing with the Sangha in the US in the last 2 years. For me personally, it's been extremely painful, but also very enlightening. Because perspectives can differ very greatly.
Yeah, so in America, we're struggling with an incredibly racist, horrible past. And some of us are struggling to get out of it, and other people are struggling to hold on to it, and they can't even see it for what it is. And so that's why you're seeing so much of it, because some of us are trying to come to terms with it and not accepting it. And yeah, the anti-Asian rhetoric and violence right now is really horrible. It's really terrible. On the other hand, you have these wonderful, wonderful movies like, oh, what's the movie with Michelle Yeoh? I really want to see that, but I don't go into theaters. What is everything? You know, Michelle Yeoh is the wife of a guy who has a dry cleaner store or something, and it turns out she's the one who can save the world. You know, and it's like, it's supposed to be this just amazing movie, and I can never remember the title because it's a very long title and it has everything in it. Everything is one of the words in the title, and it's everyone in it. You know, all the main characters are Asian, and you know, Asian American, and then you have oh, what's the other one? There, you know, all of a sudden, like, there's this Asian American art in the popular culture that's come out, that it's there, and you know, and it wasn't there before. So it's kind of interesting, these two things are happening at the same time. But yeah, Americans have a really interesting karma. We have a very interesting karma, and we're trying to work through it, and that's why you're going to see so much of it. In Singapore, it's a different karma. But here we have this karma, and some of us are trying to deal with it, and some of us are trying to hold on to it, and it's just really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I was talking about sort of avant-garde American poetry, and some of the most amazing work that was done about 20 years ago was done by young Korean American women, and it didn't get out. you know, just, and eventually, you know, people started realizing that these, you know, young Korean American women were just doing this amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Yeah. And still are. Except not everyone's young anymore. Yeah. It's very, yeah, it's all interesting. And then, you know, behind it all, it's like, it's all socially constructed. You know? So, yeah. So the absolute and the relative are not separate. How to remember that. Mike, do you have a question?
I don't, thank you.
Okay, all right. Are there any other questions?
I actually have one.
Okay.
So, you know, you mentioned karma, and I was thinking, I don't know why this thought came into my head, but I was thinking, okay, if all I have is the present, I always thought of past karma, all these bad things that happen, and I don't want to be value, so I was doing it with others, and I thought of that as a past karma. But if I only have this moment, then how can I have any past karma?
So this moment is infinite in time and space. So this moment, you know, if you say this moment, by the time you finish saying it, it's gone, right? And it takes time, you know, the sensory input comes in through our body, and then it goes through the nerves, and then our brain has to do something with it, right? I mean, like right now I'm looking at Dale, and what my mind puts together as Dale doesn't appear in my visual cortex as Dale. I have to do some work. You know, my mind has to do some work to recognize, oh, that's Dale. You know, even to recognize, oh, that's a human being. You have to work at that. You have to construct that. I'm getting back to the Avatamsaka Sutra again. You know, you have to construct, we construct our reality, right? So I've already forgotten your question.
Do I have any past karma?
What? Oh, past karma, yeah. So, yeah, so this notion of present, that actually there's no such thing, but actually there is such a thing, and the thing that is the present is actually infinite in time and space. And it's hard to wrap your head around that because all we can see is what's in the room. But our right now, yeah, that's why, because it takes time for whatever it is for my brain to come up with Dale, that takes time. So by the time I see Dale, you know, he's already changed, right? And I've already changed. So this interplay is very important. So yeah, we have past, and we have present, and we have future. That allows us to orient ourselves, that allows us to function. We need that in order to function. But it's not like there's this point called the present. It's not like that. And also, karma isn't just the bad stuff that happens, because good and evil have no self-nature, right? Karma is everything. Everything. And I was going to say everything that we do, but who's this we? Where's the limit of this we? We're embedded. There's no hard boundary. You know, it's not like you draw, you know, like I take a black pencil and I draw like this, and oh, that's Dale inside there, and everything outside is not Dale. You know, it's not like that. Poor Dale, he's sitting across from me, right? So, yeah, so it's not like that. There are no hard and fast boundaries. You know, there's one meditation technique, we don't suggest this technique, but there's one meditation technique where you're supposed to focus on the breath as it comes in through the nostrils. And that's a very interesting meditation technique, because what that shows you is, when is that breath actually inside your body? Is it when it's here? Is it when it's here? Is it when it's here? Is it when it's here or here? You know, when is that breath inside your body? Where's the boundary between inside and outside? Just like where's the boundary between past, present, and future? There is none. It's very interesting. So yeah, just wake up, that's our job. Just wake up. Help this world, that's our job. Okay, let's do it. Okay, and that's a good place to stop. So thank you, everybody.